kerjasama pemerintah dan badan usaha atau KPBU yang diatur melalui Perpres 38 tahun 2015. Untuk mendukung penerapan KPBU di Indonesia, Kementerian Keuangan melakukan inovasi pembiayaan infrastruktur melalui penyediaan berbagai fasilitas dan dukungan fiskal untuk proyek-proyek infrastruktur dengan skema KPBU. Direktorat Pengelolaan Dukungan Pemerintah dan Pembiayaan Infrastruktur atau PDPPI ditugaskan oleh Menteri Keuangan untuk memproses penyediaan PDF, VGF, dan penjaminan secara profesional dan kredibel. Project Development Facility atau PDF merupakan fasilitas untuk membantu penyiapan proyek secara profesional untuk menarik minat investor. Penanggung jawab proyek kerjasama atau PJPK yang mengajukan permohonan PDF akan diberikan pendampingan oleh tenaga profesional untuk membantu mempersiapkan prastudi kelayakan, menyusun dokumen pelelangan dan pelaksanaan transaksi, hingga tercapai financial close atau perolehan pembiayaan dari perbankan maupun lembaga pembiayaan. Fasilitas kedua, Viability Gap Fund atau VGF, merupakan dukungan yang disiapkan oleh Kementerian Keuangan dalam bentuk kontribusi sebagian biaya konstruksi yang diberikan secara tunai untuk proyek KPBU yang belum mencapai kelayakan finansial. VGF akan menurunkan biaya proyek yang harus ditanggung pihak swasta sehingga meningkatkan kelayakan finansial dan memberikan tarif yang terjangkau bagi masyarakat pengguna layanan infrastruktur. Usulan permintaan VGF yang disampaikan oleh PJPK akan diproses oleh Komite VGF yang diketuai oleh Direktur Jenderal Pengelolaan Pembiayaan dan Risiko. Proses review akan dilaksanakan dengan memperhatikan kemampuan keuangan negara dan prinsip manajemen risiko yang cermat. Penjaminan infrastruktur merupakan fasilitas ketiga yang disediakan oleh Kementerian Keuangan. Fasilitas ini diberikan kepada badan usaha untuk memberi kepastian dan kenyamanan dalam berinvestasi di Indonesia. Penjaminan yang disediakan adalah pemberian jaminan atas kewajiban finansial penanggung jawab proyek kerjasama yang dilaksanakan berdasarkan perjanjian penjaminan. Penjaminan infrastruktur dilaksanakan sesuai dengan prinsip-prinsip pengendalian dan pengelolaan risiko keuangan negara guna menjaga kesinambungan APBN. Seluruh proses penjaminan infrastruktur dilakukan oleh PT Penjaminan Infrastruktur Indonesia atau PT PII. Apabila cakupan kebutuhan penjaminan melewati kapasitas modal PT PII, maka akan dilakukan penjaminan bersama antara Kementerian Keuangan dengan PT PII. Rekomendasi persetujuan penjaminan bersama dilakukan oleh Direktorat Pengelolaan Dukungan Pemerintah dan Pembiayaan Infrastruktur atau PDPPI. Inovasi terbaru yang sudah diperkenalkan oleh Kementerian Keuangan sejak tahun 2015 adalah skema pengembalian investasi Availability Payment atau AP. Skema pengembalian investasi ini juga dikenal sebagai pembayaran berdasarkan ketersediaan layanan. AP memiliki beberapa kelebihan, antara lain tidak adanya risiko permintaan atau demand risk bagi badan usaha dan kepastian pengembalian investasi bagi badan usaha karena AP termasuk dalam jenis risiko politik yang dapat dijamin oleh Kementerian Keuangan dan PT PII. Melalui 3 fasilitas dan skema AP tersebut, Kementerian Keuangan mendorong penggunaan skema KPBU dalam pembiayaan proyek-proyek infrastruktur demi terwujudnya percepatan pertumbuhan ekonomi, peningkatan kesejahteraan masyarakat, dan pelayanan publik yang lebih baik.
Every achievement started with a single step. We may look forward, but our present actions should be accountable. In a resource-constrained world, longevity is carved by our actions. Our actions reflects our intention. Our intention reflects our responsibilities. Time passes. Environment changes, but vitality of life remains. Every shift, every relapse, the essence of life dances above seas of time. The best time to invest is decades ago. The second best time is today. A good business makes profit. A great business makes impact. Building this nation goes beyond the value chain. It takes knowledge. It takes perseverance. It takes passion. And above all, it takes commitment. We are here to flourish, to evolve, and together we are here to leave a legacy. We are confident with our future goals by being committed to our present consistency. Our value is timeless as we catalyze a sustainable development for this nation. We preserve tomorrow's by securing today's. We are the enablers for sustainable development. We are the catalyst to secure a future that the upcoming generations can reap. We are PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance.
PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance goes beyond the...
We would like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to enter the ballroom. Please take a seat, and this event will start in a few moments. Once again, we'd like to invite distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to enter the ballroom. Please take a seat, and this event will start in a few moments.
Indonesian archipelago. We actively instigate private participation in infrastructure investment through our financing and advisory services for the good cause of building this nation. IIF stands by its sustainability values, supported by our prominent shareholders, experienced management, and talented experts. We assure that our operations are implementing social and environmental policy safeguard that is accredited on a global scale. Over a decade of our existence, IIF has proven our premise that we are not only here to come, but we are here to move forward in leaps and bounds. IIF will always be committed to make an impact to the growth of this nation through sustainable infrastructure projects.
Once again, we'd like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please enter the ballroom, and you kindly take a seat. This event will start in a few moments. Once again, we'd like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you may enter the ballroom. Please take a seat, and this event will start in a few moments. Thank you.
Dasar seperti penyediaan air minum, sanitasi, listrik, perumahan, jalan, serta fasilitas kesehatan dan pendidikan. Guna mendorong pertumbuhan yang inklusif di wilayah Indonesia yang berupa kepulauan, pemerintah juga terus mendorong pembangunan infrastruktur konektivitas seperti pembangunan pelabuhan, bandara, moda transportasi massal, jalan tol, dan konektivitas digital. Kementerian Perencanaan Pembangunan memperkirakan kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur mencapai Rp6.445 triliun sepanjang periode 2020 hingga 2024. Angka ini cukup fantastis di tengah keterbatasan anggaran. Untuk itu, pemerintah telah menyusun kebijakan dan langkah strategis untuk memenuhi kebutuhan tersebut. Salah satunya adalah dengan mengoptimalkan keterlibatan pendanaan privat melalui skema KPBU dan blended finance. Diharapkan optimalisasi skema-skema pembiayaan inovatif tersebut dapat memenuhi 42% kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Dalam mengimplementasikan skema pembiayaan inovatif, pemerintah juga memperhatikan isu perubahan iklim, isu sosial, dan elemen kualitas lainnya dalam pembiayaan infrastruktur. Target Indonesia untuk mencapai Nationally Determined Contribution pada tahun 2030 dan komitmen pemerintah untuk memperhatikan kesinambungan fiskal, kepastian penyediaan layanan kepada masyarakat, dan keberlanjutan layanan menjadi fokus utama dalam formulasi berbagai kebijakan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Salah satunya dengan penerapan prinsip-prinsip quality infrastruktur investment dalam penyiapan proyek KPBU dan upaya membangun kerangka ESG dalam investasi proyek-proyek infrastruktur publik. Dengan demikian, struktur pembiayaan proyek dapat menarik lebih banyak investasi dari pasar keuangan global. Guna mendukung pelaksanaan skema blended finance ini, berbagai akses telah disediakan pemerintah Indonesia untuk
Ladies and
investor,
gentlemen, please
seperti
welcome
akses
Her
untuk
Excellency
pendanaan
Minister of
proyek
Finance of the
KPBU,
Republic
Green
of
Bank,
Indonesia,
dan
Ms. Sri
SDG.
Mulyani Indrawati. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we invite everyone please enter the ballroom and please take a seat because we are going to start this event in a few moments. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Shalom, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. May peace be upon us. Good morning, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow us to extend our warmest welcome to the launching of ESG Framework and Manual, Journey to ESG Implementation for Infrastructure Financing in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, we start our agenda today with National Anthem, the Republic of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Indonesia Raya. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. And this morning, we would like to greet and welcome Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellencies Ms. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Canadian Ambassador to Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Ms. Nadia Berger, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, Mr. Suminto, Director General of Fiscal Balance, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, Mr. Luki Alfirman, Director General of Infrastructure Finance, Ministry of Public Works and Housing, Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna, Resident Representative United Nations Development Program Indonesia, Mr. Norimasa Simonura, CEO of PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, Mr. Reynaldi Hermansyah, CEO of PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur Persero, Mr. Edwin Syahruzan, CEO of PT Angkasa Pura I, Mr. Faik Fahmi, and our distinguished guests and all participants. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dwi Farah, and it's a great honor and privilege to be an MC for today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, this event also broadcast live on YouTube of Ministry of Finance of Indonesia and PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance. And ladies and gentlemen, today we are gladly gathering in this event for the launching of the ESG Framework and Manual for Government Support and Facilities in Infrastructure Financing. The ESG Framework and Manual is the first ESG policy established by the Ministry of Finance in Infrastructure Financing. This initiative is a contribution from the Ministry of Finance to support the achievement of Indonesia's commitment to the Sustainability Development Agenda and climate change target. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, allow us to invite CEO of PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, Mr. Reynaldi Hermansyah, to deliver the opening remarks.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swasti, Nama Budaya, Salam Kebajikan, dan selamat pagi kepada bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu sekalian. Her Excellency, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Secretary General of the Ministry of Finance, Bapak Heru Pambudi, Director General of Fiscal Balance, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, Bapak Luki Alfirman, Director General of Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Suminto, Ambassador of Canada for Indonesia, Ms. Nadia Berger, World Bank Country Director for Indonesia in Timor-Leste, I believe should be joining Ms. Satu Kahkonen, Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program for Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, distinguished speakers and panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Today, despite of all the challenges that we face, we are able to gather in person together and remain persistent and optimistic. As the theme of this year Indonesia's presidency of G20, which is Recover Together, Recover Stronger, here we are all together and stronger. As we are reaching the pinnacle of the Indonesia's G20 presidency, we are gathered today to witness the launching of a framework along with its manual that intend to secure our national growth through security and soundness, otherwise known as environmental, social, and governance. From mid-2021, various institutions have collaborated to develop a framework which enables a thorough application of ESG factors in infrastructure projects. The awareness of sustainability has steadily emerged, and now it is the time to deepen and strengthen its implementation in Indonesia. ESG is beyond a terminology. It is a value that is cascaded into technicalities, and where infrastructure plays a vital role for the nation growth to prosperity, ESG also plays a vital role. This framework is a result of a collaboration under the Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia with the UNDP, World Bank, and also the Canadian government. IIF acts as the sounding board of the Ministry of Finance. Through this framework, ESG practices are expected to be the basis for all projects registered as a public-private partnership, while simultaneously increasing the involvement of private institutions in financing sustainable infrastructure. And that let us today formally witness the launching of the ESG Framework and Manual, a journey of ESG implementation for infrastructure financing in Indonesia. Let's give it a applause. Concurrently with the launching of this ESG Framework and Manual, today we will also witness the signing between IIF and PT Angkasa Pura I for IIF ESG Advisory Services for the Corporate Transformation Program in Angkasa Pura I. This ESG-based transformation program of Angkasa Pura I will mark the beginning of the transformation of over 10 airports in Indonesia. It is also an honor for us that this event will be able witnessed by the Ministry of Finance, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Therefore, ending my opening speech today, Without challenges, we would not grow. The challenges ahead are immense, but our efforts will be bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinaldi Hermansyah, for the remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, next allow us to invite Director of General of Budget, Financing and Risk Management, Minister of Finance of Indonesia, Mr. Suminto, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Her Excellency, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance, His Excellency, Bapak Basuki Hadi Mulyono, in this case represented by Pak Heri, Her Excellency, Ms. Nadia Berger, Ambassador of Canada for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Her Excellency Ms. Satu Kahkonen, the World Bank Country Director of Indonesia and Timor-Leste, His Excellency Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, Resident Representative of UNDP for Indonesia, distinguished speakers, panelists, delegates, participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to welcome you all to Bali for this important event to launch the ESG framework and manual, journey of ESG implementation for infrastructure financing in Indonesia. It is also an honor for me to continue the work that has been done under Pak Luki leadership. He has made a significant contribution in developing the framework. Ladies and gentlemen, the ESG initiative and the development of the framework and manual started back in early 2020. It is a significant part of the Indonesian government ongoing commitment to addressing climate issues and progressing the sustainability agenda. The manual provides guidance on implementing the framework to ensure the provision on infrastructure delivers positive impact to the economy. They also provide guidance on minimizing negative environmental and social aspects in which this can be achieved by carrying out mitigation activities conducted at the commencement of projects. The initiative also reflects the importance of sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and transparent development in the country, particularly in the area of the infrastructure financing. Ladies and gentlemen, during the development of the framework and manuals, we communicated with our stakeholders regularly. We benchmark the framework against international principles and guidelines. Our sincere thanks go to the UNDP and the World Bank for the continuously supporting our efforts to deliver these documents. It was also crucial that we consider Indonesia context to make the framework and manual actionable. The preparation and finalization of the deliverables require close collaborations with the Ministry of Finance SMVs and government contracting agencies. To be actionable, the initiative include the development of detailed guidelines on the incorporation of ESG in the infrastructure projects. This will be important for us at the Ministry of Finance, the contracting agencies, private partners, as well as our SMPs who are directly assisting the contracting agencies in implementing the framework. Ladies and gentlemen, the development of ESG framework and manual is just one part of the policies and instruments that Indonesia has for progressing towards the SDGs. In the context of public financing, the 2018 Green Sukuk Framework and 2021 SDG Framework have provided mechanism for the issuance of the thematic bonds by the government. From 2018 to 2021, 4 global green sukuk and 3 domestic retail green sukuk has been issued to finance green projects. Green sukuk financing is estimated to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by more than 10 million tons from 2018 to 2020. Financing was allocated across 5 eligible green sectors, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, improving climate resilience for vulnerable areas, sustainable transportation, and waste management. The SDGs framework was followed with the issuance of the first 12 years 500 million euro SDG bonds to finance environmental and social projects contributing to the 2030 National Development Agenda. This marked a historic milestone for the country as the first Asian sovereign to issue a euro-denominated SDG bond. In the broader fiscal policy context, there has been policies established on the climate change fiscal framework, carbon pricing policy, and energy transition mechanism. The development of the ESG framework and manuals for infrastructure financing will enrich fiscal instruments to mainstream sustainable development and achieve enhanced NDC targets. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I want to acknowledge the challenges that have been overcome in developing the framework and manuals. There will be more to overcome in implementation. I would like to again express thanks for the support of our development partners, including the UNDP, the Canadian government, the World Bank, and our SMVs, PTIF, PTSMI, and PTEII. I would also like to thank PTIF for your full support in organizing this event. We hope we can continue our collaboration during implementation and ongoing improvement. Only together we can address climate issues and progress towards more sustainable development. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Suminto, for the remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we'll begin the policy dialogue on mainstreaming ESG in the government support for infrastructure investment. And the session will be moderated by Desi Anwar. Allow me to introduce the profile. Desi Anwar is a senior Indonesian anchor. She has a lot of experience on various national television. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Desi Anwar.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very, very good morning to you all. And isn't it exciting now to be in Bali? I mean, finally, we are getting to that moment when we are celebrating the G20 summit. I'm excited. I mean, I'm sure you're excited too. I mean, it's been such a long, arduous road to get here, and it's great to feel the buzz in Bali, and it's my great honor and pleasure to host this session. Just a little bit of caveat, just in case I break out into this coughing fit, Minister. It's not because I've got COVID. It's last week I was swimming with whale sharks in Sumbawa. I caught a little bit of a chest cold. In Indonesian, it's called masuk angin. So, environmental, social, and governance. This is what we've been hearing now for the last few years, and we've heard that the whole world, we've committed to fulfilling our sustainable development goals targets by 2030, to alleviate poverty and also to promote equality. We also, there's a COP27 currently going on in Egypt. We are, including Indonesia, have committed to reduce emission, and for Indonesia by 2060 we want to achieve net zero emission. So issues such as the environment, issues such as social and equality, as well as good governance, very, very important in all aspects of our lives, including businesses, and not to mention when it comes to infrastructure. Infrastructure, as we all know, is a very, very important part of development, particularly in Indonesia, where having proper infrastructure can actually reduce poverty and also improve prosperity. So without further ado, I would like to invite our illustrious speakers this morning, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, as Minister of Finance of Indonesia. Big hands, please come and join me on the stage. I like your batik. I mean, I'm always trying to look like Ibu Sri Mulyani whenever I interview her. I said, I wonder what batik she's going to wear today. And what do you think of my batik? Yeah. And to the stage as well, Resident Representative UNDP Indonesia, Mr. Norimasa Shimomura. Please join me on the stage. Okay, and I think because we're starting a little bit late, so we have for the next 45 minutes, we will be talking about how can we actually embed ESG into infrastructure financing and infrastructure investments. So let me start with you, Bu Sri Mulyani, because this is an initiative, I think, it's a very important initiative under the umbrella of the Ministry of Finance, of course, supported by UNDP and IIF. Now, we have been investing in infrastructure for quite a few years now, right? And, you know, the government, particularly in the Ministry of Finance, has been very instrumental in sort of supporting the PPP, the public-private partnership. So what is different now? What does it mean having ESG embedded into infrastructure investment and financing? So what's different and what can we expect from it? And more importantly, I know infrastructure is important, but why is it now important to have ESG embedded?
Thank you, Desi. Very good morning to all of you. First, I would like to express my appreciation to the IIF and especially all the shareholders of the IIF who make this event possible, especially in promoting the principle of ESG. We have a Canadian ambassador here who also supporting this event through the World Bank Trust Fund. First, why ESG and why now? The need to build infrastructure for Indonesia is obvious. The commitment of the SDG 2030, in which one of the most important part of the SDG is the sustainable infrastructure, in this case, is very obvious. The financing need around 6 trillion. That is going to be like a huge money. And for Indonesia, that means also a huge money in this case. The size of the GDP of Indonesia is above the 1 trillion. So you can imagine how big is the need for building and achieving the SDG. Commitment on the Paris Agreement on climate change, in which we have our national determined contribution. That's also require a huge financing. So financing is one thing. And this is not new. You've already covering this kind of event for quite some time, Desi, and we always talk about infrastructure financing. So how we are going to be able to attract more capital, not only from the public, but most importantly from the private, not only from domestic, but also globally, to finance the infrastructure. One which is required is if you adopt the principle of ESG. Why ESG? ESG now becoming a principle which is adopted widely and mainstream even within the context of the global practice of financing infrastructure. ESG stands for environmental, sustainable, and governance. Meaning, if you build infrastructure, you are not only just building a hard brick and mortar project. Infrastructure certainly to achieve this poverty reduction should be designed and implemented in a way that you are not harming society, and that's why socially need to be also in a good quality or even excellent quality. Infrastructure is supposed to be improving the prosperity of the society, and so it's not harming them. The second one, that infrastructure need to be planned and implemented with good governance, no corruption for sure, and the S is the sustainability. Infrastructure is not supposed to be worsening the environment, whether this is in the form of climate change or even destruction in the form of natural environment, biodiversity and all those things. So this is really putting infrastructure as a solution which is socially compatible, good governed, and also environmentally sustainable. It's not easy, I must say. Many developing country or even developed country, they want to build infrastructure fast and cheap, of course. Fast meaning that, well, why don't we just build? Because we really need it now, desperately need it. If you talk about infrastructure, for example, like toll road, in this case, port, airport, telecommunication, water, sanitation, these are all the infrastructure which is needed for poverty reduction, for supporting growth, for increasing the productivity. But how you are going to build this infrastructure in a sustainable way, environmentally as well as socially acceptable, and also good governance. So for IIF now is going to implement this principle, and this is not yet the IIF, we have the 3 SMV special mission vehicle under the Ministry of Finance, that is PTSMI, which is actually the shareholder of the IIF together with other shareholder, PII, and then IIF. Why Ministry of Finance? Because if the Ministry of Finance promoting this kind of principle, so we are not just actually financing it for many ministries. It's supposed to be Pak Basuki is here, Pak Harry is here representing Pak Basuki as a champion for this sustainable infrastructure. We are not going to just build the infrastructure, but making sure that this infrastructure is going to be also socially, environmentally, and good governed way. And that's why Ministry of Finance promoting this ESG principle will have what you call it snowballing effect to many other ministries, to local government, because then financing is important. But we are not just providing financing, but we want to make sure that financing will be accompanied by this good principle. So that is more or less the long answer.
Okay, so it will one day be all of the government ministries will embed ESG in their infrastructure financing, because obviously it's not just the Ministry of Finance.
The ESG, or in the World Bank vocabulary, ADB vocabulary, you call it safeguard. It's actually the principle in which you are making sure that what you are financing is going to be not harming the society, and so on. So we will try to implement this. The question is, if you have this kind of principle, is it not just, oh, okay, we are committed to implement this kind of principle, but most importantly is how you are going to implement this. And that is exactly how the IIF, as well as our special mission vehicle, together with ministries in this case, is going to continue understanding the principle, knowing how to implement it, how to comply, and how to enforcing it.
Okay, before I go to you, Norimasa Sandes, Bu Ani, so what is an infrastructure investment, which complies with ESG look like? For example, say there's an infrastructure of building, and a renewable or anything, or like a toll road.
No,
what does it look like? I mean,
if you
when
have
take
the
into
toll
account-
road and you have the road is going to pass the people who live the residential area, and for example, you have to remove them, relocate.
Relocate.
So how you are going to do this in a sound principle, in which the society will also understand what is their right and what is then the responsibility of this project to do that properly in terms of the compensation, timing, and what is going to be the new environment that they are going to have. That kind of principle should be there. You talk about the toll road, which is then maybe bypassing any natural heritage, how you are going to treat that one. If you are going to actually do the CO2 emission, this is not just you are building the renewable energy, because if renewable energy may be obvious that they are going to produce energy with less CO2, but how you are going to make sure that this is environmentally also sound. Because if you talk about like a dam, are they going to destroy the biodiversity, and how you are going to treat those kind of projects? So ESG has quite a lot of on the social side, on the sustainability side, and then also on the governance side. Because governance is also, infrastructure can be very vulnerable to, usually you call it cost overrun, can be genuinely really cost overrun, because not all of them can be really well planned or can be actually see before the implementation. But there is also a cost overrun because of inefficiency or corruption. So this kind of thing that need to be differentiated.
Okay, actually, these are practices that we should have been doing all this time anyway. Taking account things that we have in the AMDAL when you want to build something, create something. But now this is going to be sort of implemented in a much more sort of policy direction. But Norimasa-san, the UN, SDG goals 2030, this is part of the MDGs. I mean, it's not, 2030 is just around the corner. How do you see, what's your understanding about embedding, ESG in all business practices, including especially infrastructure investment and infrastructure projects? Will this help? And because the UNDP, you're part of this, kind of the launching of the ESG framework.
Sure, thank you. I'd also like to thank you, Ibu Desi. A lot of my colleagues said, oh, she's a super anchor, so I was actually looking forward to meeting you, of course, Ibu Minister. And thank you very much for having me, and also congratulations for the government of Indonesia for launching the framework on SDGs as well as the manual to make it happen. It's quite important. It's also very timely, as Deputy Minister Suminto just mentioned. Government of Indonesia just upgraded its commitment to the Paris Agreement, the NDC, from 29% to 32% without international assistance, and from 41% to 43%.
I think that deserves a big clap, really, because
it's
good to overachieve on something.
Exactly. And yesterday, I don't know, I guess this is public, because Pak Luhut was speaking to Kadin Summit, Net Zero Summit, and he was saying he thinks he can reach 35% and 45%. So this was, okay, this was something I really like to hear. And it's really timely and also shows Indonesia's leadership in this region. And the timeliness is there because the government also has this grand plan for the new capital city, which will inevitably involve the mega connectivity projects, toll roads, and railway systems. So ESG framework is really a timely endeavor. Now, speaking of the significance of infrastructure itself on the SDGs, you might remember the UNDP has issued a human development report last year that talked about and introduced the concept of Anthropocene. Anthropocene is meant to mean that we human species have moved on to a new geological era where our activity hits the environment directly and the repercussion hits back the humans to the extent that it threatens the survival of human species. So this doesn't sound so good. And of course, unthoughtful infrastructure investment would be a negative force against it. But it's also undeniable that almost all the well-being of human society is enabled by infrastructure. You think about housing, you think about hospitals, schools, roads, transport systems, utilities. So it's really undeniable that our human lives and human dignity depends on the infrastructure. So the question then is, well, the question is actually not about whether or not having the infrastructure, but rather how can we make sure the investment in the infrastructure is inclusive, as the minister said, and socially unharmful, environmentally sustainable. So that's the key issue, and we have at least a part of the answer to this, which is today's topic, ESG. Implementing ESG and integrating SDGs into the development of infrastructure projects, but also in the delivery and the financing. So it's not just the infrastructure project itself, but the ecosystem around the infrastructure project has to be ESG aligned. And I think we have an opportunity because a huge private sector interest is there, because they also want to align their portfolio with ESG standard for obvious reasons. But we are also aware that different countries can have different pace and pathways to this. And I learned from the discussion in the G20 Global Infrastructure Hub, they discussed that, you know, developed countries and developing countries, emerging markets can have different paces, and they discussed, you know, what did they say? Leapfrogging pathways and special new financing schemes dedicated for new markets. Taking into consideration country-specific circumstances, some constraints on capacities and financing capabilities.
Okay. Of course, this is the launch of the ESG framework and manual. Let's go to the framework and manual itself. What are we talking about? This is of the house. So how does it work? And maybe you highlight some of the framework, and also what does it mean, you know, to investors when it comes to, you know, following the manual. What does the manual look like, basically?
I don't know whether that's the right question for the minister to answer, because the manual is actually not even my dirjen is actually knows, but you're asking me as a previous managing director of the World Bank, which, so you're lucky that at least I understand how this manual
well, I mean,
actually
we're launching
works.
it, that's a, you know.
No, I mean, it is launching, it will be launching, and that is going to be like the framework, and the manual is how you are going to implement what you call it, the social, unharmful, for example, like the infrastructure. That will be in terms of the guidance, how you are going to treat the society surrounding, directly impacted by the infrastructure. If you have to relocate, how you are going to deal the negotiation process, what kind of compensation, the mechanism to compensate. If you are talking about they are going to be affected, how you are going to then discuss with the society surrounding you. If it is going to be a sustainable aspect, then you are talking about the environment. In this case, the treatment regarding whether this is the biodiversity, the pollution, all those things. Labor negotiation is going to be very important. How you are going to procure the project in a way that it is going to be no conflict of interest, all those things. My own personal experience in this case, when I was the managing director of the bank and overseeing a lot of projects, when you implement the ESG, you really have to have a social expert that really understand the society surrounding it. You have to have the environmentalists. You also have the people who are overseeing the governance. So it's actually costly and complicated.
Yeah.
So your question should be like this. Ibu, how you are going to make sure that the infrastructure which is using the ESG principle is not going to be too expensive
Yes,
and
absolutely.
too long to implement, to prepare.
Yeah.
And that is actually my question to all my team. What I'm asking is that I want to have a good principle, but should not be an excuse that when you implement designing a project which is socially good, environmentally good, and good governed, it doesn't have to prepare for 5 years. So if we have a president, one term of the president is 5 years. If you are elected, I'm going to build infrastructure, and preparing the project need 5 years. By the end of his term, there is no project built. It's just the preparation. That will not be acceptable. Not only politically, but also in addressing the issue of poverty. Poor people cannot wait for years only for implementing the project on behalf of all these good principles. So the challenge in this case is how you are going to be able to implement a good principle project, but then it's not going to be delaying too long and becoming unaffordable because too expensive. Pak Rinaldi or Pak Luki, Pak Minto is going to be, Ibu, we are still learning. So if we are going to the league, in this case, we are still in the ASEAN game. Don't send us to the Olympic game. I don't know whether, I always said that there is only one game that is the Olympic game on the ESG. So you have to learn to be in that league, whether you prepare it or not. So you have to be really prepared for that.
Okay, so it's just, rather than creating more hurdles, but investors, they can't get away from it. It's just going to be like a policy that has to be implemented.
It is,
There's no kind of bargaining or finding loophole around it. But then,
But there is also a question regarding what you call it, the local wisdom. They call it local wisdom. Negotiating with the society, whether you are in Africa, you are in India, you are in Latin America or in Indonesia, you should understand how the society behavior, value, tradition. So these are all understanding the local wisdom is very important. It doesn't mean that, oh, in Indonesia, the standard of corruption of local wisdom is like this and Latin, not like that. It doesn't mean that you are translating. No, I don't think so. It should not.
So this is where the monitoring...
It's more like understanding the behavior, the cultural tradition, so you're respecting people because you like it or not. Globally, people different from countries to countries. Even within one country, like Indonesia, we have Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, meaning that when you are dealing with Papua, it's going to be different from when you are dealing with Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Bali here, or even Jawa, you have Jawa Timur, Jawa Tengah, Jawa Barat. So that kind of understanding is really needed because at the end, people need to be understood and respected in terms of their value. So infrastructure is not supposed to destroy people, as mentioned earlier. They are supposed to helping people to achieve the prosperity and dignity. And so the question is how you are going to build this kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, of course, so the question is if, for example, I'm an investor, and this is for international investors as well, obviously. So what's in it for me? What are the incentives? Like you said, it's adding to my cost, and also the follow-up. There has to be some kind of measurement mechanism. There has to be monitoring and make sure that that there is compliance. How is this going to be done? Is this something that you?
Actually, on the opening remark by Pak Suminto, he mentioned that Indonesia just issued the SDG bond just before the upheaval. When was that, Pak? Last year. And we actually have 500 million with a very, very low price. Why? I think the investor, first, of course, they need to put money in the right instrument. But having putting the SDG is showing that Indonesia is going to use this money for the SDG. Again, this is like one principle that understood easily and providing a guarantee for the investor regarding, oh, okay, I'm investing in this good quality of project because they are adopting the SG. So then it can attract, become a catalytic, very powerful catalytic role. And actually then, if this project adopting the ESG standard, that means it's safe for me to invest in that. Safe meaning that it is not that they are actually care about the infrastructure, they also care about their own reputation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm investing in this infrastructure which is adopting ESG, then this investor can say that I actually not only solving the problem of poverty, but I feel good and it is actually protecting my own reputation as an investor.
Okay, which is very, very important these days. I mean, we are talking about environmental climate change issues, and it's becoming a planetary problem. Norimasa-san, what do you think of the Ministry of Finance initiatives, and also the framework? Presumably you know what the framework looks like, the manuals. In terms of the standards that the framework refers to, is this of, and whether it's going to be effective when it comes to implementation?
Sure. I should say that the ESG framework, well, we supported the development of it, so we cannot trash it.
Yeah.
It's actually a very good framework, and it's going to work.
Yes, it's based on
Yes, it has 3 pillars on environment, social, and governance, and then there are 10 standards within it, including climate, waste management, biodiversity, social criteria, cultural criteria, and many things that you can think of. It's quite effective, particularly because it's accompanied by the guidelines. But I should just say that obviously having an ESG framework is more than a win-win, because it is win for the economy, it is win for the business, and it's also win over poverty as well, because it's an investment, enabling investment for socially unharmful investment. And then, of course, it is a win for the planet. So this is a gain for all of us. And I think ESG is now a standard for at least 3-4 reasons of the future game plan in the infrastructure sector. Partly, first and foremost, I really commend the Ministry of Finance for the leadership, because having a workable, functional ESG standard is also a duty of the country and the government. And this enables the country also to ensure they protect the society, environment, and ensure that there is effective governance. But at the same time, this will help the government to also comply, meet the international commitments, be it Paris Agreement and SDGs as well. But it's not just the duties and obligations, it's more than that, because by instituting the ESG, as the minister started at the very beginning, it will start actually raising investment, and it will turn Indonesia into a country that is investment competitive, if I may call it that way. And then that has another, trickling effect, and because the credit rating, the sovereign credit rating and cost of borrowing will eventually go down for Indonesia, because the the credit rating agencies nowadays do incorporate the ESG into their assessment. But ultimately, by doing this, it needs to become a standard of the future game plan, because it's not just infrastructure. By instituting ESG framework and the practice of ESG in the infrastructure PPP initiative initially, eventually it will create a broad-based ecosystem for ESG-based investment. And more resources will start coming into the country. And I've actually seen these projects myself, and recently I went to Winch Island, and there was elevated deck for humans to walk. And I heard the purpose of that elevated deck was to protect the people from Komodo dragons. But then I told the Vice Minister who was with me that, well, actually you're helping the biodiversity to be intact. But obviously, I just wanted to finish my reply by saying that these actually complement many good things that the government is doing. For instance, the work on Green Sukuk, SDG bond, it goes hand in hand, because those resources, funding that you raise through the Sukuk is invested in some of the infrastructure. And we as UNDP are very proud and grateful that we just finished the first SDG impact reporting with the Ministry of Finance, and we are continuing to do that.
And it looks good? I mean, you see progress?
Yes, it has to be good. And of course, it's a tool to learn lesson as well, because sometimes it is not perfect. And of course, we have to look at what is the part of the things that we can also learn. And this also goes very much hand in hand with energy transition business. So we work with Ministry of Finance, for instance, on the carbon tax roadmap, and then with Ministry of Energy with emissions cap roadmap, because as you can see, emissions cap and carbon tax are 2 variables of the same carbon pricing system. And then with Ministry of Environment, we work now in helping them to establish a system of carbon credit certification, registry, and monitoring, reporting, verification. So we are in that business together, and I'm also looking forward on Monday to sign a memorandum of understanding with the PTSMI on the energy transition.
Okay, so is this, particularly, I mean, we're in a G20 sort of, very international forum. Is this something that investors, particularly, large investors, are excited about, financing, an ESG infrastructure projects, and also just very quickly on what the framework, the manual thing. Does it mean like there's a checklist that they have to comply with, and then somebody obviously has to go through it and follow up and monitor, and then make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do? So this is all part of it, right?
Quick answer, yes.
Yes. More hurdles, like Ibu Annie said, more things to do.
Yes. The challenge will be in doing it, because you have to collect data and put together a good report that is credible. And I think ESG investors out there are looking for this kind of report to come out to make sure that what they invest in this country, or let me just change the answer a little bit, because I've recently got in touch with IFI, one of the IFI, who was saying, Nori, we have a bit of a challenge. We have no doubts that the money will be spent well in this country. However, I have my own market. I need to report to stakeholders that my money was spent for the purpose that we raised the money for, which is green.
Yeah.
So then they were saying, can UNDP help in certifying that this was actually spent for good reasons, because we could act as an independent certifier. So there's lots of investors who are ready to do it if there is a guarantee or vouch from international organization or someone else that the money was actually spent for a good purpose.
Okay. Bu Ani, I mean, you mentioned the green bonds. The Sukuk, and we've had this talk in the past, and the financial instruments. Do you actually see the appetite for green projects increasing and coming to Indonesia? And how are we doing when it comes to, attracting these investments coming in? And particularly, how are we capitalizing on our G20 presidency? Do you see sort of the money flowing in, or at least the commitments, or?
Well, first, the issue of the sustainable finance, or in this case, with, talking to be very specific about the transition of energy, is one of the topic which is going to be addressed at the leaders level, as well as in a finance track, in which we are discussing regarding how the need for investment transition toward green can be actually also attracting more private sector capital. It cannot be only fulfilled by the public money, that is the government budget, all through the multilateral institution like World Bank, ADB, AIIB, Islamic Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and all the regional banks. It should be also attracting more, which is most important, private sector money. Now, for us to be able to create the leverage, policy leverage to attract more private sector money, first, from the supply of money that is the private sector owned, the regulation that is governing those money should also mainstream this kind of ESG, including the green. And that's why the discussion in the finance track on the G20, we talk about the FSB, Financial Sector Board, which is BIS, which is now talking more and more about environmental and climate change risk within the private sector, especially financing decision. That need to be built in within that decision. How much money they have? 130 trillion, that's according Mark Carney on the, what you call it, UNFCCC. They have more than 130 trillion money under their management, asset under their management. So how they are going to use this money? For Indonesia, of course, it's going to be one of the most important challenges, and that's why for Indonesia to be able to convince, first, they should understand Indonesia better. Ministry of Finance established special mission vehicle like PTSMI, PTPII, IIF, in order for them to become a real catalytic in translating the language of the private sector and the public sector so that they can actually jointly financing the project together. And that can be easily facilitated if we have the same principle. That is the principle which is following the green principle or ESG principle in general. And that is exactly what we are trying to do. Specifically for the energy transition mechanism, in which the Minister of Finance, working with the Minister of Environment, Minister of Energy, Pak Luhut in this case, is actually trying to build the country platform. We just launched the country platform for energy transition mechanism last July during the G20 finance ministers, in which PTSMI, here Edwin is the CEO and 40% of the shareholder of the IIF, is becoming the manager in charge for this country platform. And that's becoming also a vehicle or platform for us to be able to, okay, if Indonesia is going to transform their energy toward a greener, that's including addressing the coal power plant, but also a new renewable energy project, how we are going to be able to come up with a platform that everybody have the confidence to invest using this the same platform. We also using our INA, that is Indonesia Investment Authority, our special sovereign wealth fund, in order for us to also continue bridging this catalytic role with the private sector. We've already have the commitment from the CIF, 500 million, for this energy transition mechanism that can be leveraged into 4 billion. We are going, President is going to join to announce this, the ETM financing mechanism on the leaders meeting. So I'm not going to steal the show. It's going to be the President who's going to announce how much is going to be financing for this kind of, what you call it, commitment of Indonesia to transform our continued need, the growing need, demand for energy will continue certainly there, because Indonesia is middle income countries, continue growing. Our third quarter growth is 5.72%, will continue growing, and that's definitely require more energy. So the question for us, how you are going to fulfill this demand for energy which is continue growing without worsening the emission. And that's why this is going to be very critical for us to design the transition from the less green to become a greener energy. And I think we've already put quite a lot, as mentioned earlier by Nomori, carbon tax is there, cap and trade is there, carbon market now they introduce certification for the carbon so that it can create more liquidity and financing. We are now discussing with the Parliament on the Undang-Undang P2SK, that is the financial sector reform, in which the trading platform for this green instrument can be traded through the capital market in Indonesia. So that's all what we call it building block and foundation for us to be able to make sure that from regulatory point of view, policy point of view, instrument and institutional point of view, these are all going to be the building block needed for us to be able to attract more capital. That is private sector, trillion coming to Indonesia, billion and billion in order for us to design the right transition.
So there's a ESG infrastructure investment. It
That's
comes
definitely
under the ETM. It
Yes.
is all one, so it's all one door.
Yes. Well, the green is one which is maybe heavy on the sustainability, but it is also then on the governance and social. I think they are all equally also important.
Okay, just out of interest, so we need 6 trillion, for infrastructure project. Because there's a financing gap, that's why there's a PPP. The government cannot finance everything, obviously. So what does it look like now, especially we have the multi-development banks, we have the private sector, we have, international philanthropists, whatever. How do you see the structure for, our infrastructure investment coming from? Maybe?
Well, the biggest need, road, toll road and road is going to be there. Railways is another. I think for Indonesia, Indonesia is an archipelago country, and that's why port is going to be very important. Telecommunications is the one in which government putting also our own public money in order for us to be able to build the infrastructure for the telecommunication. So connectivity is very, very important for a country as big as Indonesia, and especially because our country have some area, some region which is still lag behind comparing to the maybe Pulau Jawa in this case. And that's why we really have to make sure that the investment on infrastructure is going to be very important. How you are going to structuring it? For many of this project, which is maybe financially not feasible, usually we are going to use more public money, and if it is going to be like design it in a way that it can then be prepared in a way that it will attract more private capital, then we are going to do it. Pak Hari from the Minister of PUPR now have the responsibility that all the infrastructure that we have already built can become an asset class. This is very important because when you just build it and then become an asset and then you are not going to like leverage those assets, that's become one of the most unproductive one. So that's why for Indonesia to increase more the financing sophistication but still prudent, you have to make sure that the infrastructure being built becoming an asset class. And this will require quite a lot of another structuring financing, because many of the investors saying that I want to finance Indonesia, but I don't want to take the risk of the construction and preparation risk. So I want to invest when the infrastructure is already finished being built and now they are generating revenue, I'm going to invest. So for us, how we are going to first preparing project, that is very important one. Usually using the ADB standard, World Bank standard, IFC standard, then you are going to be, okay, if this standard is good, that's including the ESG standard, they say that, oh, this project is good. Then implementing this project is going to be another hurdle. Construction cost overrun and all these implications still need to be built. That's usually the risk that some investors don't have the appetite to take those risks. They just want to have, I have money, I want to have a clean investment. And that's why they usually choose, for example, lending money, because lending it, you don't really have to think about all those hurdles. I will get the return. But how we are going to, as a country, able to attract not only in terms of borrowing, but equity financing, blending it with many other sources of financing. So that is exactly the more important of creating the asset class as well as how to put it within the market. That is all the area which we are asking our special mission vehicle to do it. Because Ministry of Finance traditionally in the past is doing our budget, we are talking about APBN, we are talking about laporan keuangan, and that's it. To have the sophistication to deal with the investors, you are going to have a totally different skill, and that is exactly what we're trying to do with special mission vehicle.
And it's good that you had experience in the World Bank, so you can, you know, wear different hats. Norimasu-san, there is a lot of money, obviously, in the private sector. They are thirsty for, you know, good and new investments. So the key, I think, it's exactly that. It's the quality of the projects at the end of the day, right? So for Indonesia, what do you find as the most attractive, and you know, and how should you know, the investors, you know, go about really looking for the best projects that they can find, and obviously the projects themselves have to be completely viable.
Yeah, so when we talk about ESG and infrastructure investment, we're also obviously concerned about greenwashing, bluewashing, these things that we talk about. Come to think of it, our sister agency, UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, they issued a report last year saying a staggering 79% of greenhouse gas in the world is emitted from infrastructure of one sort.
79%, that's
yeah,
really
but
huge.
you think about it, it's toll roads, it's hospital, education facilities, utilities, so everything is infrastructure. So definitely working on the infrastructure and greening the infrastructure is going to be a major push for SDGs in Paris. So that's an opportunity there. But then there's also a danger of greenwashing as well. But I think the government plays a key role there, and that's why I really commend the government of Indonesia for leading and establishing this framework to make a point that this is important. And even in G20, how many times I think the finance track, especially Sustainable Finance Working Group, which UNDP headquarters is also serving as a secretariat, they've actually referred to the importance of ESG in raising sustainable finance. And the Sustainable Finance Working Group, I think they compiled sustainable finance, so many sustainable finance reports. And they did raise concern that there are still some barriers against raising financing, sustainable financing. And they asked themselves the question, why? Because there is no enough alignment between investment and sustainability principle. There's no tool available to do that. And there is no regulatory framework and enforcement agency who actually monitors and enforces it. So there is lots of rooms for opportunities.
So this ESG framework and manual would fill that gap. Like that would be the tool.
Yes, definitely. And I think what is therefore important is I can think of 2-3 things. Definitely a robust and consistent reporting on the ESG will become the key. The manual is there. We have to do it. And it just reminds me a little bit of what we do for the Green Sukuk and SDG report, SDG bonds that UNDP is working with the Ministry of Finance on the impact reporting. So we need to do the impact reporting on the ESG as well. And as the Minister said, in doing that, the report needs to connect the dots. It needs to reference and align with the strategies, the framework, the guideline, and regulations. And it has to connect to each other. Otherwise, the report will not be credible. And the other thing that I can think of is that over time, as ESG standard is implemented in the future, the government could consider raising the bar by, let's say, expanding the scope, the number of, let's say, sectors that are being, subjected to the ESG framework, number of projects. You can increase these things over time and deepen the commitment for the ESG. This is, and also do the gap analysis as you go through what is working, what is not working, and what kind of capacity needs to be built. I think Minister at the very beginning was alluded to the cost of entry of introducing new things. It's the same thing with introduction of renewable energy and all these things in private sector. There is a cost of doing that because they need to raise awareness, they need to acquire capacities, they need to gain ability to report on them. So this needs to happen, and this probably is the fastest way for Indonesia to be aspiring to become an Olympic athlete in the ESG.
But you're optimistic that we can attract those investment through good projects, and obviously the mechanism of it is very, very important, right?
Definitely with these reportings, and then, if the world finds out that Indonesia is already implementing and even going deeper, giving itself a harder, sort of higher bar. The other thing I think is important is not so many countries are actually vocally aspiring or leading this area. So Indonesia can actually become a center of creating an alliance, global alliance for ESGs. It puts Indonesia at the center of it, but at the same time, it creates a peer-to-peer pressure among the interested countries so that there is less of greenwashing and all that. So I think there's a huge opportunity that this country can actually contribute to other countries, and then aspire to be even better inside Indonesia.
You see a lot of, is greenwashing a thing in Indonesia? Do you see? This is something concerning, and this is putting off potential investors? Or?
Well, I don't have a caseload in front of me, and I'm not accusing anyone. It's just that there is always a potential of doing this in any country, and Indonesia is not immune to it.
And that's why this compliance thing
exactly.
is very, very important. We've only got a few more minutes left. Perhaps, last words. Just in terms of the green investment, you mentioned that there's the energy transition investment that is needed, for example, to retire our coal power plants and so on. And there's the other investment, which is building renewable energy and renewable infrastructure. Now, just going forward, very quickly, as also a closing remark, what would you like to see come out of the G20 when it comes to addressing these challenges, making sure that we are getting the investment for all exactly the things that we need? So align, our needs with the investors' needs so that all our targets are achieved.
Well, on the G20, the discussion regarding the infrastructure is one of the priority on the finance track, and that's why the discussion, this is not new topic at all. Actually, since I think even back to Australia or even before that, they've already put the infrastructure as one of the important topic to be discussed on the finance track especially. The question is not about why infrastructure is important, but how we are going to be able to deliver the infrastructure. Now the discussion is about the quality of infrastructure, and when you talk about quality, meaning that how you measure quality. This is exactly why this kind of standard is very important. So that's one point. Infrastructure important, but more on the quality and how you measure quality, you need to have a standard. That's including the environment. The second one, in terms of the financing, on the G20, this is also one of the most important. There is really a huge gap between the source of financing and the demand or the need for the infrastructure. And that's why within the G20, the discussion about regarding how you are going to bridge this gap using the policy lever, you are talking about the instrument, you are talking about this standard setting, so that there will be less hurdle or obstacle for the source of financing to then reaching to the project, or for the country or the project to get the access of the financing. I think that's the most important one. The third one within this, the G20, and especially with today's event, we are talking about the ESG mainstreaming, and is going to then adopt the formula and manual. I think this is going to be one of the very important journey. When you talk about formula or manual, this is not like simsalabim, like tomorrow you are going to have like sunny side up, like you are having those cooking instantly. This is really a journey. If you are going to like have the manual, or even in this case the standard, we have to make sure that when the standard is going to be established and mainstream, the compliance is going to be very important. And that's why you are going to see more and more, when you talk about infrastructure, maybe what we have in mind is always, oh, we have to hire more engineer, civil engineering maybe, and financing expert to make sure that they are. But we are going to be also hiring more and more the social expert, the environmental aspect, expert. And that is going to be something which is good for Indonesia. Because I think many of the social experts in Indonesia, social scientists, they need to then use their knowledge in order for them to be able to solve the real problem also in our society. That is how to deliver a good infrastructure quality. I think that's going to be the implication. So this journey is going to be long. And even for the multilateral institution like the World Bank, ADB, their safeguard, once they adopt it, is not going to be once and forever. But they also continue refining it, reforming it. So I expect that this kind of manual as well as formula for the ESG that is going to be launched today is going to be just the beginning of all this journey, in which in the next 5 or even 10 years, we are going to continue refining it. Because it's not like once and for all, one formula which is going to be fits all for all the cases of the infrastructure.
So it should be sustainable, this kind of.
It will be consistently
it's not going to
implemented
change
and
after
reviewed.
2024. Suddenly,
Exactly.
oops, the manual's gone. Oh, you know.
Yeah. So this is for the energy, for water, for toll road, for railroad, many other projects. I think that will are also creating. And I think, to be very honest, Desi, for the Ministry of Finance, I'm going to have quite a lot of my team who really have to learn about this. Because they can really asking mainstreaming, but they are not they don't have the ownership. I think that's not good. So for the Ministry of Finance, for example, I can imagine like my DJ budget. Pak Luki is now is going to in charge for transferring to local government. We are transferring 1/3 of our spending, which is around 800 trillion. So it's good Pak Luki now in charge for that. So I'm expecting him to mainstream that to the local government. So this is going to be something that within the Ministry of Finance, they need to have this full ownership of this principle.
And you have to create, obviously.
Then you have the
new.
cascading and mainstreaming to the all
Will there be a
other-
special sort of department dealing with ESG?
Well, I haven't think about it as of today, but for sure Pak Minto's division, Pak Luki division, DJ budget division, my SMV division, they are all need to understood this principle and how to implement it. Not just reading the book. They need to go to the project and really looking at all.
Yeah, and you need to have the people who understand. Like you said, you need to have the environmental
The
experts.
good side is
and
we
the
are going to
social-
hire more people, which is good. More expert on this area. The people who understand this, the social issue, understand about governance, understand about the environment. So many, it's not just saying that Ibu, we've already spent money, we built this many kilometer of road, we built this kind of bridges. No, that's not that kind of report. Although we are actually quite pioneering in making this transparency. I always like communicating, this is how much money we spend, this is the result, output, outcome, how many actually road has been built, how long, how many bridges has been built. All these things is already now become a tradition for the Ministry of Finance. Every month, we actually making this public. But now we are going to ask more Ministry of Finance to talk about, okay, it's not only the quantity, but what is the quality of this?
Yeah.
And that will require much, much more demanding how to understand the quality and how you are going to communicate this to the public. So public will know that why should I pay tax? How this tax is going to be translated into a good quality of infrastructure. I think this is part of what you call it the public confidence, public trust building, which is I think important for any democracy to actually being maintained by all of us.
Okay, and I think it's great. We'll give big hands. It's great that the Ministry of Finance is, initiating this. And how, your thoughts, how to go ahead? This has to go beyond the G20 summit. I mean, everything is all about the G20 summit, and we don't want to be, a month from now, suddenly everything's forgotten. And it's back to business as usual, making sure the sustainability of it all, and also making sure the framework and the manuals being followed, and there's compliance. And also it should be an opportunity for Indonesia to access more financing, global financing, to finance our infrastructure and our growth, right?
Well, Ibu Desi, I think you just said it all.
Okay.
But no, first, thank you very much for having me once again for this this dialogue. I learned a lot also, and I also sensed a huge commitment and interest from around the tables in this room. Ultimately, if you ask me, I'll be really quick, it is about our DNA. And DNA in UNDP, for instance, is all about leave no one behind. And honestly, for us, infrastructure investment, or any investment for that matter, is very futile unless if it is not actually inclusive, if it does not contribute to sustainability, and if it actually does not create disaster resilience, which is quite relevant for a country like Indonesia. And I think ESG framework and the commitment to ESG investment is actually presenting Indonesia a huge opportunity. I think it's a golden ticket in that sense for Indonesia to actually green the investment for now, and then eventually create a wide, broader ecosystem to green overall investment beyond infrastructure. And as the minister said, this is not going to happen overnight. This is the journey. And for that reason, we feel UNDP is really privileged and very grateful for being able to be part of this journey. And we know it's going to be a long journey, but we would like to accompany this journey with the ministry, other ministries, and also the partners in this room.
Yes, the beginning of a long journey. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a first step, and I can do that. This is a first step. And big hands, please, to our Minister of Finance, and also to our UNDP representative. Now, there is a photo op now, I've been told, after this, and I know that you have to go, you have more things to attend, and then that would be followed by the launch of the ESG framework and manuals as well. So with all due respects, Norimasa-san and also Bu Ani, we need to stand up so they can clear out these chairs. And then if we just sort of scoot over here. And then I would like to, let me just stand here and then because there will be a photo op with everybody. So who would you like to, Miss MC, will you call the people who would take part in the photo op or? All right. Anyway, big hands while we're waiting. Thank you very much for the dialogue, Norimasa-san, and also Annie. And I'll just return this session to the MC.
Thank you, moderator. Please give applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Desi Anwar and the speakers. For the moderator, we can proceed. Would like to invite Mr. Norimasa, please. Yes, and on the stage, I would like to invite Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia to join us. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we'll begin the launching of the ESG Framework and Manual. And we would like to invite Ms. Nadia Berger, Canadian Ambassador to Indonesia and Timor-Leste. And we'd like to invite Mr. Suminto, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance. And we'd like to invite Director General of Fiscal Balance, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, Mr. Luki Alfirman. Director General of Infrastructure Financing, Ministry of Public Works and Housing, Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna. CEO of PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, Mr. Reynaldi Hermansyah. CEO of PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur Persero, Mr. Edwin Syahruzal. And Director of Business of Indonesia Infrastructure Guarantee Fund, Mr. Andre Permana. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, so this is the moment we're going to invite the VIPs. We'll touch the LED screen together on the screen. So may we invite all the VIPs on my count to touch the screen. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, on my count, 3, 2, 1. Big round of applause for the launching of ESG Framework and Manual. And would like to invite Minister Sri Mulyani to deliver the document, ESG Framework and Manual. At first, we'd like to invite Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna. So Minister Sri Mulyani will give to Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna. Mr. Reynaldi Hermansyah. Mr. ballroom. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the dialogue session, I'd like to inform you for the full document of the ESG framework and manual can be downloaded on the Indonesia PPP's website via the QR link shown on the screen and prepare on the table. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a short break. So I'd like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the short break, and there's also a coffee break in the foyer area. ladies and gentlemen, may we invite everyone, please kindly take your seat because we are going to continue for the next session. Once again, we would like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please kindly take your seat because we are going to start this event and continue for the next session in a few moments. Thank you.
infrastruktur menjadi lokomotif pembangunan nasional dan daerah yang menggerakkan pertumbuhan ekonomi suatu negara. Oleh karenanya, penting bagi pemerintah untuk mewujudkan kehadiran infrastruktur dalam kehidupan masyarakat, terutama infrastruktur dasar seperti penyediaan air minum, sanitasi, listrik, perumahan, jalan, serta fasilitas kesehatan dan pendidikan. Guna mendorong pertumbuhan yang inklusif di wilayah Indonesia yang berupa kepulauan, pemerintah juga terus mendorong pembangunan infrastruktur konektivitas seperti pembangunan pelabuhan, bandara, moda transportasi massal, jalan tol, dan konektivitas digital. Kementerian Perencanaan Pembangunan memperkirakan kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur mencapai Rp6.445 triliun sepanjang periode 2020 hingga 2024. Angka ini cukup fantastis di tengah keterbatasan anggaran. Untuk itu, pemerintah telah menyusun kebijakan dan langkah strategis untuk memenuhi kebutuhan tersebut. Salah satunya adalah dengan mengoptimalkan keterlibatan pendanaan privat melalui skema KPBU dan blended finance. Diharapkan optimalisasi skema-skema pembiayaan inovatif tersebut dapat memenuhi 42% kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Dalam mengimplementasikan skema pembiayaan inovatif, pemerintah juga memperhatikan isu perubahan iklim, isu sosial, dan elemen kualitas lainnya dalam pembiayaan infrastruktur. Target Indonesia untuk mencapai Nationally Determined Contribution pada tahun 2030 dan komitmen pemerintah untuk memperhatikan kesinambungan fiskal, kepastian penyediaan layanan kepada masyarakat, dan keberlanjutan layanan menjadi fokus utama dalam formulasi berbagai kebijakan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Salah satunya dengan penerapan prinsip-prinsip quality infrastruktur investment dalam penyiapan proyek KPBU dan upaya membangun kerangka ESG dalam investasi proyek-proyek infrastruktur publik. Dengan demikian, struktur pembiayaan proyek dapat menarik lebih banyak investasi dari pasar keuangan global. Guna mendukung pelaksanaan skema blended finance ini, berbagai akses telah disediakan pemerintah Indonesia untuk investor, seperti akses untuk pendanaan proyek KPBU, Green Bond, dan SDG Indonesia One. Skema KPBU sendiri merupakan suatu bentuk kerjasama antara pemerintah dan badan usaha dalam penyediaan layanan infrastruktur untuk kepentingan umum yang mengacu pada spesifikasi yang telah ditetapkan sebelumnya oleh pemerintah. Dalam skema ini, sebagian atau seluruh penyediaan layanan infrastrukturnya menggunakan sumber daya badan usaha atau privat dengan memperhatikan pembagian risiko di antara para pihak. Komitmen pemerintah dalam mengembangkan skema KPBU juga telah diwujudkan dalam pembentukan berbagai institusi yang menangani KPBU. Dan sebagai wujud dukungan nyata kepada proyek-proyek KPBU, berbagai bentuk dukungan fiskal telah diformulasikan dan disediakan oleh Kementerian Keuangan, yang meliputi Project Development Facility untuk mendukung penanggung jawab proyek kerjasama dalam menyiapkan dan mentransaksikan proyek, Viability Gap Fund yang merupakan dukungan fiskal untuk sebagian biaya konstruksi proyek, penjaminan infrastruktur melalui PT PII atau penjaminan bersama dengan Menteri Keuangan untuk meningkatkan creditworthiness proyek, asistensi dalam pelaksanaan proyek dengan skema KPBU Availability Payment, pendanaan pembebasan lahan untuk proyek strategis nasional, dukungan fiskal lainnya berupa pengaturan penggunaan barang milik negara, insentif pajak, dan koordinasi terkait keuangan daerah. Target tersebut juga didukung dari sisi penyediaan instrumen investasi yang mengedepankan isu lingkungan sebagai aksi nyata memerangi isu perubahan iklim. Indonesia saat ini telah mengembangkan Green Bond dan Green Sukuk Framework yang bertujuan untuk membiayai proyek-proyek infrastruktur hijau. Dengan skema KPBU dan instrumen pembiayaan yang mendukung pembangunan infrastruktur hijau yang berkualitas, akses bagi investor juga diperluas melalui SDG Indonesia One. SDG Indonesia One merupakan platform kerjasama pendanaan terintegrasi untuk mendukung pembangunan infrastruktur yang berorientasi pada pencapaian tujuan pembangunan berkelanjutan. SDG Indonesia One menyediakan sejumlah fasilitas, meliputi fasilitas pengembangan proyek yang dapat terintegrasi dengan PDF, fasilitas mitigasi risiko, fasilitas pembiayaan, dan fasilitas investasi. Dengan demikian, struktur pembiayaan infrastruktur di Indonesia dapat menjadi lebih variatif dan terbuka dengan berbagai instrumen. Pendekatan blended finance yang melibatkan banyak stakeholder ini diharapkan dapat mencapai pembangunan dan pengembangan infrastruktur secara optimal sesuai dengan komitmen Indonesia untuk menyediakan layanan infrastruktur yang berkelanjutan, ramah lingkungan, dan sesuai dengan kebutuhan masyarakat.
Pembangunan infrastruktur diperlukan untuk mempercepat pertumbuhan ekonomi, meningkatkan kesejahteraan masyarakat, dan mewujudkan tersedianya pelayanan publik yang lebih baik. Di tengah keterbatasan, pemerintah menawarkan alternatif pembiayaan yang melibatkan partisipasi pihak swasta guna memenuhi kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Alternatif ini adalah skema kerjasama pemerintah dan badan usaha atau KPBU yang diatur melalui Perpres 38 tahun 2015. Untuk mendukung penerapan KPBU di Indonesia, Kementerian Keuangan melakukan inovasi pembiayaan infrastruktur melalui penyediaan berbagai fasilitas dan dukungan fiskal untuk proyek-proyek infrastruktur dengan skema KPBU. Direktorat Pengelolaan Dukungan Pemerintah dan Pembiayaan Infrastruktur atau PDPPI ditugaskan oleh Menteri Keuangan untuk memproses penyediaan PDF, VGF, dan penjaminan secara profesional dan kredibel. Project Development Facility atau PDF merupakan fasilitas untuk membantu penyiapan proyek secara profesional untuk menarik minat investor. Penanggung jawab proyek kerjasama atau PJPK yang mengajukan permohonan PDF akan diberikan pendampingan oleh tenaga profesional untuk membantu mempersiapkan prastudi kelayakan, menyusun dokumen pelelangan dan pelaksanaan transaksi, hingga tercapai financial close atau perolehan pembiayaan dari perbankan maupun lembaga pembiayaan. Fasilitas kedua, Viability Gap Fund atau VGF, merupakan dukungan yang disiapkan oleh Kementerian Keuangan dalam bentuk kontribusi sebagian biaya konstruksi yang diberikan secara tunai untuk proyek KPBU yang belum mencapai kelayakan finansial. VGF akan menurunkan biaya proyek yang harus ditanggung pihak swasta sehingga meningkatkan kelayakan finansial dan memberikan tarif yang terjangkau bagi masyarakat pengguna layanan infrastruktur. Usulan permintaan VGF yang disampaikan oleh PJPK akan diproses oleh Komite VGF yang diketuai oleh Direktur Jenderal Pengelolaan Pembiayaan dan Risiko. Proses review akan dilaksanakan dengan memperhatikan kemampuan keuangan negara dan prinsip manajemen risiko yang cermat. Penjaminan infrastruktur merupakan fasilitas ketiga yang disediakan oleh Kementerian Keuangan. Fasilitas ini diberikan kepada badan usaha untuk memberi kepastian dan kenyamanan dalam berinvestasi di Indonesia. Penjaminan yang disediakan adalah pemberian jaminan atas kewajiban finansial penanggung jawab proyek kerjasama yang dilaksanakan berdasarkan perjanjian penjaminan. Penjaminan infrastruktur dilaksanakan sesuai dengan prinsip-prinsip pengendalian dan pengelolaan risiko keuangan negara guna menjaga kesinambungan APBN. Seluruh proses penjaminan infrastruktur dilakukan oleh PT Penjaminan Infrastruktur Indonesia atau PT PII. Apabila cakupan kebutuhan penjaminan melewati kapasitas modal PT PII, maka akan dilakukan penjaminan bersama antara Kementerian Keuangan dengan PT PII. Rekomendasi persetujuan penjaminan bersama dilakukan oleh Direktorat Pengelolaan Dukungan Pemerintah dan Pembiayaan Infrastruktur atau PDPPI. Inovasi terbaru yang sudah diperkenalkan oleh Kementerian Keuangan sejak tahun 2015 adalah skema pengembalian investasi Availability Payment atau AP. Skema pengembalian investasi ini juga dikenal sebagai pembayaran berdasarkan ketersediaan layanan. AP memiliki beberapa kelebihan, antara lain tidak adanya risiko permintaan atau demand risk bagi badan usaha dan kepastian pengembalian investasi bagi badan usaha karena EPI termasuk dalam jenis risiko politik yang dapat dijamin oleh Kementerian Keuangan dan PT PI. Melalui 3 fasilitas dan skema EPI tersebut, Kementerian Keuangan mendorong penggunaan skema KPBU dalam pembiayaan proyek-proyek infrastruktur demi terwujudnya percepatan pertumbuhan ekonomi, peningkatan kesejahteraan masyarakat, dan pelayanan publik yang lebih baik.
Every achievement started with a single step. We may look forward, but our present actions should be accountable. In a resource-constrained world, longevity is carved by our actions. Our actions reflects our intention. Our intention reflects our responsibilities. Time passes. Environment changes, but vitality of life remains. Every shift, every relapse, essence of life dances above seas of time. The best time to invest is decades ago. The second best time is today. A good business makes profit. A great business makes impact. Building this nation goes beyond the value chain. It takes knowledge, it takes perseverance, it takes passion, and above all, it takes commitment. We are here to flourish, to evolve, and together we are here to leave a legacy. We are confident with our future goals by being committed to our present consistency. Our value is timeless as we catalyze a sustainable development for this nation. We preserve tomorrow's by securing today's. We are the enablers for sustainable development. We are the catalyst to secure a future that the upcoming generations can reap. We are PT.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now we'll begin the head of agreement signing between PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance and PT Angkasa Pura I for IASI Advisory Services for Corporate Transformation Program in AP1. I'd like to invite Mr. Renaldi Hermansyah, CEO of PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, Mr. Faik Fahmi, CEO of PT Angkasa Pura I, Mr. Irman Boyle, Head of Advisory Group PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, and Mr. Yudi Rizkyardi Darun, Director of Finance and Risk Management of PT Angkasa Pura I. Please sign head of agreement. photo once again. Thank you. Please be seated. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now we will begin the dialogue session on the journey of ESG implementation in infrastructure development in Indonesia. We'll have our speakers, Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna, Director General of Infrastructure Financing, Ministry of Public Works and Housing, Mr. Aldo Artoko, President Director Arcora Hydro Indonesia, Mr. Satoshi Ishihara, Senior Social Development Specialist, the World Bank, and this session will be moderated by Mr. Wito Tantra, Chief Risk Officer of PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our moderator and speakers.
I suppose we can start. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wito Tantra. I will be the moderator. I'm honored to be moderator for this session. We have Pak Heri, we have Pak Aldo, and Pak Aldo from the Arcora, and then Satoshi from the World Bank. In the previous sessions, we hear that there's a growing concern over ESG implementations and in Indonesia. There's need to enhance where we are. The paradigm, however, is shifting. The paradigm is shifting. We are having more people believing that there's need for the social environmental aspect to coexist with economic returns. So here, the panelists basically going to share their journey in implementing ESG. So we have diversified of panelist members. Pak Heri is from the policymakers and the government, PUPR, Pak Aldo from the private sectors, and Pak Satoshi from the World Bank, senior specialist for environmental, for social. So with that, we also going to have input from two pioneers who's also been in the financing world. We has been the SMB, who has been also practicing ESG in the project they finance, SMI and PAE. So without further ado, let me start the questions for the panelists. Pak Heri, thank you. Good morning.
Thank you and good morning.
As part of the PUPR, has a key mandate to carry out formulation and implementation of policies in the field of public works and housing infrastructure development. We know that Ministry of PUPR is committed to achieving the 2030 goals on SDG. My question to you, Pak, could you share your experience with the audience here? How has the ESG been factored into your policy formulation? And for what are the challenges you are facing in implementing ESG? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Moderator. In Ministry of Public Work, we are dealing with many infrastructure, starting with the toll road and include the non-toll road as well, water resources management, housing, and also SDG 6. The SDG 6, of course, they already comply with this ESG, I believe, especially the sustainable and environmental aspect. But for other infrastructure, we are just starting to adopt the concept and the principle. That's why we are trying to connect with World Bank, SMI, as well as IIF, how we put forward all of the infrastructure follow the principle. And so far with this manual and guidance, I believe we can make all of the project will follow the principle of the ESG. And the challenge, if we talk about the challenge, it is like a new concept in our ministry and also the stakeholder as well. So the challenge is how we make all the content, the principle will be included in the process as well as in the document. Such as, for example, we are now preparing a project for the multipurpose dam, which is also get PDF from Ministry of Finance. We hope we want to include this ESG principle in this project. And also we have another two public housing project, which is also we can try this principle. Then with this clear pilot project, everybody can learn internally as well as our stakeholder, the bidder and others participants.
Okay, so you feeling there's a strong cooperation from the stakeholders to comply with this requirement?
Because in infrastructure it starts with initiation from the government. By putting the principle in the study, in the tendering process, in the concession agreement, so it will be bind all of the participants to follow the principle. So this is something like with that condition also it will invite all the investors that expecting the ESG and other thing that as Bu Menteri mentioned, they're familiar with the principle.
Thank you, Pak. Let me shift to the private sector, Pak Aldo, as one of the larger privately run players in renewable energy. Can you just talk about how's the Arcora has been doing and how is it actually take advantage of the trend in ESG of late?
Thank you, Wawito. So Arcora, as a renewable energy power company specializing in hydropower, it's undeniably that the trend for ESG is very strong. I mean, especially compared to about 10 years ago. I remember when I founded the companies, we have this ideal dream of we want to provide clean energies, clean powers. However, in business conduct discussions, in financing discussion, the word ESG itself never even been mentioned even once, as far as I remember, right? All they think about is actually what's the returns, how are you capable to pay back, but the value of clean energy, ESG principles never even been mentioned. So right now, I am thankful that we're living in somewhat a different mindset, which is a very good thing. And the company Arcora started implementing this ESG principles. Truth be told, was just in a way to get a financing at start, right? Because as a young companies, we're trying to get the best financing possible, and we met with company SMB such IIF. And that's where we are mandated to implement this ESG principles. But interesting fact is that after we start implementing this ESG principles, we started to see this benefit directly, which is from operational standpoint, we started seeing support, especially from the communities around the project area. Undeniably very good support. I mean, compared to the other industries that I saw, read in the news, I never seen such things where the communities are against it, heartily against it, because if we do apply this ESG principles, people are backing us up. Undeniably, they're supporting us up. So that's a very good thing. That's one of the advantage that we can see by applying the ESG. And other than that, in terms of about 5 years ago, there's not so much commercial banks that have this infrastructure-friendly type of financings. And applying these ESG principles, making the company have access through this infrastructure-friendly financings with competitive financings, right? And one of the other things also that worth to share, so our company recently, about 4 to 5 months ago, just conducted the initial public offerings. And before that IPO process, when we do our non-deal roadshows, one of the things that the investors wanted to see is basically how the company implementing this ESG principles. So as a private sectors, implementing these ESG sectors really open up to a lot of broad type of investors that are actually willing to put their money on into projects, especially renewable energy project like us. And by doing the right things right, definitely help valuations because operations go smoothly, financings get cheaper and longer. So those are things that we think we see benefit. So by what we originally doing this ESG principle as a mandate or a way to get money or financings, now it has become a company principle for us. And one of the biggest advantage that we feel that through the IPO process, we actually landed a very high reputable investors that like Astra Internationals, they decided to invest on us because they also know that we are implementing this ESG, which one of the key aspects why they invest in us as well. So I guess it's undeniably a very good benefit for the company.
Thank you. Yes, certainly this is a trend that we like to see, more believers on ESG adaptation of ESG. We wish your testimony will actually encourage people at least to try ESG, to give it a try, because I think there's a some measure of level of skepticism that ESG will work. So, this is good. Let me turn to Pak Satoshi, the World Bank. We know that the World Bank has been promoting ESG sustainability and applies its own standard, the ESF 2017, for project it finances, and to be consistent with the standard of other international multilateral companies. My question is that how does World Bank see the progress of ESG implementation in Indonesia, development infrastructure, in particular with regard to infrastructure project development in Indonesia, and what benefit can Indonesia gain from applying ESG in projects? There's two more questions. How does the bank address the gaps between the international standard and the local context? And third is, what has the bank done so far to help preparing the ESG transformation?
Thanks, Pak Wito. Yeah, I mean, those are very good questions. And I have to say, really, I started working in Indonesia about 2 years ago. So I cannot really tell much about the history of ESG in Indonesia. But I can say that Indonesia came a very long way when it comes to ESG performance. I can see this as I read the documents and see project history and so on. So, and this latest development of this ESG journey is this development of this ESG strategy and the manual. And as a result of this long history, Indonesia actually has a lot of good laws and regulations and standards and strategies and manuals, and they're really consistent with international standards. So Indonesia is quite advanced as compared to many other countries I used to work in, poor countries where they need to develop more of they need to start from much lower level. But that's the biggest challenge, because always the last mile is the biggest challenge to make. So I have experience working in Turkey, for instance. Working in Turkey is easy and difficult, because on the one hand, Turkey is like Indonesia, a lot of good laws and regulation experts and so on, who can do a lot of work. Different from very poor countries where they don't have expertise or need to hire a lot of experts and so on. But at the same time, it's easier for us to work in poor countries in a way, because we can simply hire international experts, bring them into the project and let them work and take care of all the international standards. But it's different for countries like Turkey, Indonesia, where we don't really need such external experts, because national experts are able to deliver a lot of things, but not quite there yet. So this last mile is the biggest challenge, I think, for Indonesia to make. And there's a very important challenge, because Indonesia will need a lot of financing to achieve energy transitions, climate adaptations, and so forth, which means a lot of financing has to come from international sources, international financiers, private, bilateral, or some international, some financing institutions like the World Bank and EIB. They require higher ESG standards. So Indonesia will be able to benefit quite a lot in improving access to financing by really making this last mile, this last mile in this long journey of ESG implementation. Yeah, the benefit is large. The challenge is big, but benefit is large, in my view.
The last miles is typically more difficult than the previous miles. Okay, let me turn to contribution from SMI, Pak Faris. Dear Pak Faris, we know SMI has been pioneer in the implementation of ESG, while also establishing the integrated platform SDG1 that combines the public and private funds to funnel into projects supporting SDG. So my question is that, can you please share your experience? What are the challenges you are facing? What are the key lessons learned that we can all pick up from?
Thank you, Pak Wito.
Yes,
thank you, Pak Wito, and thank you for inviting us. We are really happy that today we see another landmark, Pak Wito, with regards to ESG standards. If you say PTSMI are the pioneer, actually we we follow EEF footsteps, but EEF is the first. We learn a lot, even maybe in the first transaction, we are the one who's complaining to EEF that why your requirement is too hard. But now we understand, and then I believe starting from maybe the second years of our establishment, seeing how EEF doing the good job, and then we follow your footsteps, and then we are together the one who facing those challenges. So basically, what we are do is we just like IIF, we create standards and guidelines to implement the ESG, or we call it ESS framework, environmental and social safeguards. So we apply that, and then we see that it's not only us. We can ask for multilateral helps to create a good standards, which is also, we hope that also tally with local wisdom. So with regards to the challenge, yes, buy-in is something that we face at the first stage of our effort, ya Pak Wito, ya. There are pushback, there are not only from our syndications, but also from the debtor usually. But I believe with gradual approach, we do many capacity building, we can overcome those issues. What most important, we believe, is that government support, regulatory support is really important to push this framework to be more effective. Maybe I choose OJK regulation, FSA regulation with regards to green taxonomy. With this green taxonomy, with this regulation, many lenders now more understand, and now I believe currently we just going to follow EEF or SMI standard. I believe now with those regulations, we can have a better standards, with regards to the ESG. And lastly, I believe besides the regulations, we also have to do a showcase, which shows to the public the benefit, just like Pak Aldo said previously, that with the business case that shows benefit of ESG, and then people will follow. Thank you, Pak.
Just one additional question, Pak. Do you believe that clients are going in the spirit of the ESG? You see more of that taking place of late?
Yes, okay. Pak. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Faris. Pak Andre? Same question. Oh, there we go. Hi, Pak. Same questions, but regard to guarantee issuance, sovereign guarantee issuance.
So more on the challenges, ya Pak, ya?
More on the challenges and how do you clients behave?
Okay.
And when you prescribe to them certain corrective action plan that need to be done, okay. What kind of reception you typically receive, and do you think that they are at a level where it's more on the spirit of the compliance, not so much on paper compliance itself?
Okay. If okay, I'm standing for answering the question. Thank you, Pak Wito, and all distinguished panelists and all the audience. I think first of all, I'd like to say that out of the 3 SMVs assigned by Bu Menteri Keuangan to endorse the ESG framework, we are the only one has a bit different entity, because we are a sovereign guarantee provider. And in terms of how we do the guarantee, especially the evaluation, the screening, and also the structuring, including how to monitor and to get the best risk mitigation for the project, we always deal with this kind of situation. I think when you mention major clients, you sit next to him, Pak Heri, and also I have Pak Danang in his capacity in Toll Road Authority and some other colleagues here, which actually has many experiences with us as a guarantor how to deal with these issues. So we, as regulated in the guarantee regulation, we actually have to ensure first the viability of the project. So not only on the technical side, fiscally or also financially, but also on the ENS and governance side. So this is something that we try to translate to our process. Even as we first know the ESMF, when we have the World Bank loan back in 2012, we try to implement that, and how we see the gap, as mentioned earlier by previous speakers and also even by Bu Menteri, and how we actually want to still help the GCA, like Minister of Public Works, to still proceed with the project, but in a manageable way and more sustainable way. So in terms of understanding, I think this is the first issue that we need to overcome together. And I think the launching of this ESG framework and manuals has been very, very timely to work with that. And I'm agree that with all the panelists that this is something that we should conduct it together. And in terms of how it will affect our value, as we perceive ourselves as also the financing enabler, because we hope with the guarantee the financier will support the project with the financial close and so on until the project delivers its services. But somehow the role as the project enabler and ecosystem enabler, this is something that we cannot really avoid. So this is something that we hope with the availability of those green financings and how the gap exists on how those funding will go to select to the right project, and how on the ground with Pak Heri, with Pak Danang, we try to structure the appropriate project with the project structure, and something that I hope in the future will be done a bit more easier with this framework. But I agree that how to adapt with the characteristic with each project, and also the dynamics of, let's say, we have, for instance, in some of the toll road, when they go to the construction stage, and then somehow they found the artifacts and during the construction, in terms of this is something that as risk allocation in the contract is something that we need to deal with. And I think this also been addressed in the ESG framework, and also some other issues. We identify that how to assess the carbon footprint, and something new in the ESG framework is something that we need to translate as well, and we need to work on this together. I think that's all from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Andre. Thank you, Pak Faris. Let me circle back to the panelists. Pak Heri, in relation to the ESG framework and ESG manual for PP project that has been launched, your directorate, PUPR, will be the PJPK or GCA for the piloting projects. In your perspective, how can such ESG framework and ESG manual be implemented effectively and efficiently? What changes you plan to undertake to ensure or recalibrate to ensure that the framework and the manual are implemented in a way as intended?
Yeah. First, of course, we choose the pilot. Yeah, by putting this in the pilot, it will be easy to see what is the weaknesses, what kind of regulation should be changed. Yeah. Nowadays, yeah, with the 3 pilot, I believe we can start with how we develop the final business case with already comply with the ESG, and then along with this process, we also create the concession agreement. We need to improve this document as well, the process for the procurement and the bidding, yeah, as well as later in the implementation. So we see this process, and then of course we need to evaluate later. Based on that evaluation, we can what we call it, we can put this principle into all of these PPP project under Ministry of Public Works. So this is the big work, I believe, yeah. And also, we had another challenge about this principle. Usually, later on, it will come back to the time and also the cost, as Menteri mentioned. So this is also, we hope we can collaborate with all of the stakeholder, how we adopt the principle while we still keep the time shorter, the process, and the cost as well. So this is, I believe, most important thing. Otherwise, we just create another problem with, regardless, more benefit from the ESG.
Indeed, but just to echo what Bu Sri Mulyani said earlier, it is a process. You know, so it's not like you know, the sunny side up story. So yes, I think people, all of us, sort of have a similar expectation that this is going to take some time, but important thing that we need to make progress.
Yeah.
So thank you,
progress, but of course we need to make a progress that's proper with our objective and goals.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the local context
local
as well.
Content
Which is
wisdom.
important. Okay. Thank you, Pak Heri. Pak Aldo, what are the key challenges of implementing ESG in your sector, and what would be your recommendation to enhance that effectiveness?
Okay, so I'm speaking from private sector, especially power producer, renewable energy power producer sector, because that's where our Cora is. I think it's worth to note that renewable energy industries itself somewhat already aligned with some of the ESG principles by itself. However, I think one of the biggest misconception that people has, especially people from the private sectors, is that, look, if I do have a business or if I do have a project in renewable energy, you're automatically ESG. That is absolutely not right. Right, because what we have seen before is that people doing green projects or renewable energy projects, but they execute it poorly. Hence, that renewable energy project can have a bad ESG impact by itself. Right? So I guess I'm very appreciative of this releasing of this framework, because this helps educate the private sectors more and more in terms of what is the real ESG. So we have to eradicate that the conception that if you do renewable energy correctly, if you do renewable energy, automatically you're doing ESG. That is not right. So having the right ESG, for me at least, is doing the right things right. So you want to do renewable energy, I think that's the right thing to do. But are you doing it the right way? So that's also important. So one of the challenges that actually giving this educations to the private players to be able to do the right things right is one of the challenges, because most of the people think that if I'm doing renewable energy, I'm doing the ESG. That is not the understanding. That is not the right understanding, at least. And in terms of looking back into our experience, our Cora's experience, that we get to know ESG is actually from the financing mandates, that we started have to do it, but realizing there's a lot of economic benefit of it by doing so. And so far, I think the best way to get implementations is through financing platform, right? That give this ESG mandate to be implemented into its portfolios. But we have to understand that not all financing platforms have this mandate, or maybe most financing platform does not have this mandate. As far as I know, the one that have been seriously mandated this ESG principle is SMVs. And one of the key challenge that we need to do is trying to get this message across into another financing platforms or financier, i.e. other banks, other than SMVs, that can trying to mandate this ESG principles into the other private sectors. And I guess what always been a challenge is actually how to get this collective effort, right? Everybody knows ESG is a good thing, but how do we get this collective effort together? And I think I'm very optimistic where our government's moving into the perfect directions, where as Ibu Menteri mentioned before, hopefully from the Ministry of Finance can have this snowballing effect into the other ministerial in our governments to installing this ESG principle. So I guess collective effort is actually on the challenge, and I think we're on the right track to go where we need to go.
Thank you. I like what you said about the need to approach ESG as a systematic way. So it has to be very measured, and clear policy and procedures is instrumental. There's also need from the government to actually keep updating with the standards in accordance to the evolutions, what's going on. So that's good. The other thing is the OJK part, which is you mentioned about financiers, lenders. So we also want to work together with them, establishing the similar standard here. Okay, so let's move to Pak Satoshi. Questions for you. We know that World Bank is also assisting MOF in formulating the ESG manuals. What are the main objectives of this manual development, and how can this ESG manual be implemented efficiently? The other part of the question is that what policy, capacities, and other circumstances required to facilitate ESG implementation in Indonesia? What are the major challenges in implementing phase, and how will the bank continue to support, meaning the World Bank continue to support? Thank you.
Thanks, Pak Wito. Well, before really responding to your question, I have to say one caveat that we've been working very closely with Minister of Finance for the development of ESG manual. I went to many meetings, provided a lot of comments, but it's already in good shape. But because it's so important, that bank management needs to review it and give clearance, which is not obtained yet. So from World Bank perspective, it is still kind of work in progress. But that's, I would say, a nature of the ESG. It's always work in progress. It's a long-term game that few countries have achieved overnight, the high ESG performance. So we're talking about this long journey of ESG implementation need to be made. And this is exactly the reason we're supporting the development of ESG manual, and then some other additional support that we provide on ESG, in the sense that, as Pak Aldo said, it comes down to a lot of details, not only doing what is right, but do it right. That's the important thing. And in my perspective, this ESG manual provides a lot of things, not only about do what is right, but how to do it right. And I think it is the very important point to clarify. Many, the investors, ESG specialists, experts in the country, is that how things need to be done to achieve ESG performance. Back to the same issue that I said about the last mile in the long journey of ESG performance. And I think this ESG manual can do a lot of work in doing exactly how to do things right, in what categories and what stages of ESG or PPP, infrastructure development processes. And we're happy to continue to work, back to the original question from you, continue to work with all government agencies and other relevant agencies in developing guidelines, doing knowledge sharing, training, and so on and so forth, because we know it's not going to be achieved overnight. It's a long journey. So we continue to stay with all stakeholders, share international experience, and be with all stakeholders in this long journey of ESG implementation.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all. I have one final question, which apply to the three of you. Thank you for your insightful answer to our questions. Moving forward, how do you think we should organize ourselves in terms of strategy, coordination, collaboration, partnership, monitoring, and evaluation, or milestone to foster an effective implementation of ESG? And how do we see the role of government, the role of SMV, the role of international institutions such as the World Bank and ADB to push the envelope further so that the implementation goes beyond just a paper compliance? and as well as the role of private sectors like Akora. Let's start with you, Pak Heri.
Yeah, this is like an orchestra, yeah, how we collaborate each other. Since the process will involve government, yeah, as a regulator, private sector as a participant, as well as the financial institution. Then I believe we can start with the incentive principle first, and later maybe this incentive, by the time whenever it is already all of the institution adopt this concept, then it become like this incentive for other that do not apply the ESG principle. So the keyword, I believe, this is like a collaborative effort among all of the stakeholder. Like IIGA, for example, they can take the role to give just give the guarantee for the project that adopt this ESG, for example, yeah. So such kind like that.
Okay, thank you, Pak. Aldo?
From the role of the governments, so far we've seen a lot of improvement. Definitely, us as the private sectors do feel the benefit of it. Not only for the financing sectors, because finance sector is only one thing, but from regulatories and licensings, permit, we have seen a lot of improvement. And again, as I said, I'm very optimistic in terms of direction where we're going, because it has been, there's a big improvement, especially for the past 4 to 5 years compared to 10 years ago, because I've been there 10 years ago and I experienced the hard part, and now I've experienced the changes. For the private sectors has been thankful for that, but there are always room for improvement, but I think the governments are working together on that part. And by having this kind of G20 where ESG is one of the important issues to discuss, it should definitely help further going forward. And as a role for the private sectors, where I can speak of myself, is that right now, Arcora itself is a public company. By being a public company, it kind of put you in some sort of a spotlight in terms of your performances and what you do. And I think by implementing these ESGs has been drawing a lot of high reputable investors internationally and also domestically. It should be able to incentivize other private sectors in Indonesia or other private players in Indonesia to have that understanding that implementing ESG principle is not seen as a cost, but it's seen as a good business practice, because at the end of the day, it would give a good economic benefit for the company itself.
Is this something that you can take up with your association, maybe, to spread the gospel about ESG?
I do have, I do have. But look, I think main of the people in the sectors and the associations, they do know that doing ESG is the right thing to do. However, that's why I said I'm very thankful about the framework, because even though they know ESG is a good thing, they don't know exactly how to do it. Like Mr. Tatusi mentioned, is that now by having this framework, they know exactly how to do to conduct their businesses, right? Because previously they don't know how to do proper land acquisitions. They don't know how to do a full environmental diligence. What happened if in the project site they found a biodiversities? Yes. So this framework helped that. And truth be told, a lot of entrepreneurs like myself, when I see myself back then, I know it's a good thing to have, but I don't know what to do, right? And I'm actually learning from IIF about the importance, and I feel the benefit of it. And I believe this framework would definitely help Pawito.
Yeah, for IIF, the implementation of ESG before was focusing on at the project level that we finance. We have expanded that to also include ESG as part of our advisory service. So you'll be our good brand ambassador, Aldo.
would be very happy to, Pak Wito.
Okay, same questions. Sadosi?
Thank you. Well, a lot has been said already, but I want to get back a little bit to these questions that Srimiliani said of the, ESG is not just compliance. We need to believe that. And then there's a question about the additional cost and time and delay of doing ESG and things. I just want to get back to some history. And if you get back to 18th century, 19th century in England, you see a lot of juniors, 10-year-old boys, 15-year-old girls working in factories, coal mines. Industrialists open up the forest, cut trees, burn trees to burn coal, all the bad things. We see that. And then, when then socialists criticize these industrialists, they said exactly the same thing we hear. It's too costly. You're killing the industry. You're killing the jobs. And then what happens? Eventually, this is socialist, or not really socialist, but this ESG prevailed. And then industrialists needed to take on good ESG, actually, in their practice. And it didn't slow down the economic development of these countries. They adapted to the changing needs of the society. So I would say the same thing. ESG need to be in the DNA of ourselves. We need to believe that. It needs to be part of the heart of ourselves. And then we start practicing that. And then market will catch up, developing technology, developing new markets, new products, and so on and so forth. So I think Indonesia, or the globally, all countries ourselves are in this transition period where we still, like we used to be in the 18th and 19th century, we're in transition period. A lot of skeptics. But I do believe that we continue to practice ESG, including through the implementation of the ESG manual, we're able to transform the society and make more and more people believe that ESG is the way to go. Stop here.
Nicely said, Satoshi. I just want to say thank you for the, insightful discussions, very informative discussions. I just want to summarize by stating some of the key takeaways from this discussion. First, there's actually strong need to continue the progress, the journey, to transform into the best practices of ESG. Yeah, I think the conviction is there. Maybe not all are convinced, but everyone needs to have such a journey. Everyone is in different phases of the journey, and there's actually, for them to march forward together with the regulators, government, lenders equally are accountable to make sure that ESG is adopted in its fullest meaning. The challenges are known, that this will require resources, will requires commitment, and requires change of mindset. But it would be good, for companies like Arcora, who has actually very convinced, has seen the benefits of ESG. So that would be a good, promoter for this. And then the country standards, as well as the best international standard, there's still a gap. We need to recognize there's a gap, and we need to move how we're going to close the gap. Bu Sri Mulyani earlier mentioned about the need to be adaptive to the changes in situation in the future. So it doesn't mean that there's a finish line, and this is something that will continue, something for all the parties involved. So the regulation will also evolve over time, depending on the situation. And then the need to work collaboratively, of course, the public, the government, the private sectors. I think just in closing, I just want to say that the concept of triple play is very much doable. So any skeptic on that, he or she should not have that skeptic. We have evidence here that the economic development, profits, shareholders' return, no matter how you call it, can coexist by applying ESG. So with that, I would like to thank the participants, the audience. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to invite for a token of appreciation. But before that, please take a photo group first. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is a token of appreciation, so please allow me to invite Mr. Faris, Mr. Andre Permana, and Mr. Brahmantio Isdijoso, and Mr. Renaldi Hermansyah to deliver a token of appreciation. So I'd like to invite Mr. Rinaldi will deliver the token of appreciation to Mr. Heri Trisaputra, Mr. Aldo, and Mr. Andre. Aldo. For the next, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to invite Mr. Barahmantio will deliver the token of appreciation to Mr. Satoshi. And we'd like to invite to Mr. Wito. Yeah. And for the last, Bapak Fari. We are going to have a group photo together. ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of today's event. On behalf of the organizing committee, once again, we'd like to say thank you so much for all the speakers, moderator for delivering such a valuable insight. And for all the participants, we also would like to extend deepest appreciation. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the engagement throughout this event. And I want to inform you for the lunch, it will be at Ana Rasa Restaurant on the first floor. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dwi Vera signing off as your master ceremony today. Once again, thank you and we wish you all a pleasant day. Om Santi 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 Om. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Shalom. Namo Buddhaya.